It's Rylie.
It's Sloan.
It's Briar.
Hang on to your broomsticks.
It's about to get eerie.
Today's episode could contain themes and elements uncomfortable to some listeners. Please check the episode description and remember to always take care of yourself.
Today, it's a bit of a mixture between a true crime and a conspiracy. I personally think it's a conspiracy. But we're going to talk about the Lindbergh baby and the kidnapping, hoax, all the good stuff about it. So we're going to try and squeeze it in.
All the goods.
Yeah, so it's a little all over the place because there was new stuff I wanted to talk about, stuff that is just kind of about the case to talk about. So we're going to dive on in. So this case is really big because it really changed the world as far as kidnappings go. It created the Federal Kidnapping Act, which is also called the Lindbergh Law, which went into effect June 22nd, 1932, which would have been the Lindbergh baby, Charles Lindbergh, little baby Lindy, second birthday. So, and what that is it says when there's a kidnapping and it goes across state lines that the FBI steps in and it becomes a federal crime. Because they have more resources than local police to stretch out and try and find them. Which, I didn't dive a whole lot into the law part of it, but I do wonder if it's also stems from the fact of how shady Charles Lindbergh was with allowing the FBI to not help. And we will dive into that later. So, I'll start with a little bit about Charles Lindbergh. He was already famous, so it wasn't just his son going missing. He was a young pilot, and he actually was big for flying across the Atlantic Ocean in one flight. And that was in May of 1927, and it was a 33.5 hour flight. And he did it like all in one swoop. His wife was Anne Constance Morrow, and something that I didn't know. He actually dated her sister first.
Oh.
Yeah, her sister Elizabeth Morrow. He dated her first. And he got with Anne Morrow in 1929.
Did her sister die too?
No, I don't think her sister's dead. I had to think about it. I was like, I don't know, maybe. I'm diving right into that. I think he's a shady man. Shady man.
Well, I mean, he didn't want the FBI looking into it, so.
Yeah, it keeps going. So I'm just going to start into all the weirdness that started it, and then we'll go from there. So he got with Anne Morrow in 1929 after dating her sister, and that year she received a threatening letter that she was going to be abducted and killed unless she placed $50,000 in a box in a cemetery. So that's very bizarre, so remember that.
No, so that was her sister, or that was her?
That was her. The year she got with him, that happened.
And $50,000, that's a lot of money, especially back in the 1920s.
1929. Yeah. So I thought that was weird, and it was just kind of like this thing. And they never gave any money anywhere. They were just like, oh, just ignore it.
It'll be okay.
Yeah. So, but remember that. We will be back to that. So, I didn't know this either. He was kind of rumored, speculated, I think, to be a Nazi sympathizer. I don't like him enough to research anything about him other than this case. Honestly. But he actually had 5 kids out of wedlock. And 3 different baby mamas in Germany.
Dang, he was
in
busy.
The 50s. Yeah, so this is later. This is after everything. But, so he just...
Shady man.
Trifling. He was
trifling. A scrub.
Trifling. He was a scrub. That was perfect for him. Except I guess he did have his own money because he was famous. Whatever, he's trifling. So, the night that the baby went missing was March 1st, 1932. And it was around 10 p.m. when Charles Lindbergh Jr.'s nurse, Betty Gow, actually went to check on the baby. She found the baby was gone, And the only thing left was a $50,000 ransom note on the window. And a ladder was propped up outside the window. Which, there's so much shadiness around the night that it happened. Because the week before, Lindbergh actually hid the baby in a closet. And played a prank, quote unquote, on his wife and Betty Gal, the nurse, saying that the baby was missing. Which I'm already like, excuse me?
Yeah.
So, he had done that. But also this night, he never missed public speaking engagements. Like, this was emphasized. He was known for, he went to all of them. He liked talking about himself. He was very full of himself. He always went to these.
Oh, so a narcissistic man who likes to hide his baby in the closet. Got it.
Yes. So this night, March 1st, 1932, he was supposed to be at New York University giving a speech or some sort of speaking engagement. And he missed. He didn't show up. He didn't tell him he wasn't going to be there. He just, no show.
This was on the same night?
Yeah, this was March 1st, 1932. And he arrived home at 8:25. Now, he had called between 8 and 10 and had said he was going to be home late. And he told them that no one was to go into the nursery. Between 8 and 10, no one can go into the nursery. And the reason was he felt like that between the nurse and then they were overly babying the baby. Yeah. And so he was to be left alone. But the baby had been sick this weekend too, which I'll hit here in a second. So it's a sick baby and he's like, no, just leave him in there. Between 8 and 10, no one is to go into the nursery on the night the baby goes missing.
Okay. When he misses his first speaking engagement ever.
And he ended up not showing up to the speaking engagement.
And played a prank.
Right before.
Prior, yeah.
Yep. So, Betty and Ann actually even thought he was pranking him again because the week before he did it. Mm. So, they thought it was kind of like a joke. And we're like, oh, he's just at it again. Hiding the baby. So, his first words out of his mouth when he walked into the room were, they've stolen the baby. They've stolen our baby. It was actually, they've stolen our baby.
Who's
instantly.
they?
Right. He instantly walked in and was like, they've stolen our baby. What are you talking about? He also, that night, they were building a house, so they were back and forth between some places. So, not many, and that's one of the things in the case, not many people even knew they were going to be at that house. It was in Hopewell, New Jersey, the house they were at. And I think that was the one they were building, and it wasn't completely finished for them to live there full time, but it was finished enough for them to stay there. And so, since the baby was sick, they actually ended up staying a little longer. So, not a whole lot of people even knew they were going to be there because it was a last-minute decision to stay. They'd been there. They were spending the weekends there, but it was a last-minute decision to stay longer.
Because the baby was sick?
Because the baby was sick, and it's just cold outside, and they were like, we'll just stay here again. He told them he would be late, and he made sure as soon as he got home, he pulled in late, and he honked the horn, which Ann said was kind of weird, because he never did that. He just kind of pulled in and honked, and they were like, oh, he's here. I'm like, oh, why'd he honk? So they would, know exactly when he got there? Allegedly?
Yeah.
He could pretend it was exactly when he got there? That's...
trifling.
Yeah. Shadiness. They also happened this weekend when they went to the house, forgot to take one of their dogs with them. And it just so happened to be the dog that slept in little baby Lindy's room every night. Who was always with him, always slept in his room. They just happened to forget him at the other house.
Of course.
Right? This one random
one
weekend.
that
The
stays
one weekend.
With the baby.
Yep. They had another, because they have another dog that they did take, who there was like no reaction from anybody. No one heard anything, except for Charles Lindbergh claims to have heard wood snapping, but no one else heard it. Anne didn't hear it. There were also 3 other servants in the house, and nobody heard anything. Their dog, their watchdog's name was Wagoosh. Wagoosh. But he was the one that they took, not the one they forgot. But he didn't react to anything that night, like anyone being there, anything weird. And no one heard anything.
So no stranger, but your dog's not going to act weird with its owner.
Right, to you. So, that was really that night.
Well, and that makes me wonder if already the dog that stayed with the baby already didn't like Charles.
It's possible.
Because why would you leave that dog specifically?
Right. Especially unless you're going to do something. You're going to tell everybody to leave the baby in the room. No one can mess with them between 8 and 10. There's no dog in there.
Yeah. So.
I mean.
Shady.
It just keeps adding. It's just like one thing after another. And the more you look into it, I was like, that's crazy. And so random. And he missed the engagement. He was home, his speaking engagement. And the ransom note, also there's some speculation with that. Because it seemed to have appeared after a search of the house was done. So they went in, the nurse went in, found the baby missing, and didn't say anything about a note. So then her and the family and everybody searching for the baby. Charles Lindbergh walks back in the room, finds the ransom note.
Of course.
Oh, conveniently. It's not there
Right.
when the nurse originally goes in, and he's like, oh, let me check. Let me do the man's job.
And then
find
he
the
found
note.
Just chilling on the windowsill.
So how's that note compare to the note Anne got about how she'd be kidnapped or whatever?
I don't think there was ever a comparison between her note and this. And that could have been sort of unrelated. They did ask for the same amount, which I think is interesting.
That's what
Yeah.
I was wondering, because I was going to ask that too, because it was
Yeah.
both 50,000. I'm like, that is very specific.
Right. I was like, that's why it stuck out. So it could have, maybe it was just because he was kind of famous. But I just thought it was so weird that he was like this weird prankster who would do these pranks that weren't funny. And then he did that maybe he did them both.
Yeah.
And asked for $50,000. Gets a little weirder with that situation too. And we'll get further
We'll let you
into that.
continue.
We'll get
Yeah.
further into that. But there's no pictures of her note anywhere. You can actually look up and see images of all of these ransom notes that we're going to talk about, because it's a doozy. There's a lot of ransom notes and a lot of back and
Lord.
forth. And we'll go through them briefly. I won't read them all, but we'll go through little tidbits of it as we go. The other thing that was found was outside the window, propped up against the house, was a ladder. And it was actually 2, like the old wooden ladders. Not like what you think today where they like slide up and down.
Yeah.
So it was 2 ladders connected together. And there was actually a broken rung towards the bottom, which ties into my theory. Which after I go over everything, I will tell you my firm beliefs that I actually even wrote a paper on in college. That's how strongly I feel about this. So that was the other thing. The crime scene was destroyed. Back then, the police and their investigations were already a little chaotic, and
Oh, gosh.
you know how those police in the day were in the 30s. But J. Edgar Hoover, who I seem to talk about a lot in my episodes, he sent 2 FBI agents to do whatever. They're here to help you figure this out, find your baby. And Charles Lindbergh actually sent him away because the New York State police were reporting to him he was never treated like a suspect, never looked at. he ran the investigation. All of it. He called the shots, even the police. Because he was a huge figure at that time. Like, he was really famous.
Yeah.
For what he did. And there's some other stuff he did. Like I said, I'm like, meh. But I just know he was really big, and so they were like...
So he owned the police, pretty much.
Yeah, they were proud to help him. He was like one of those American hero type figures. So, but he sent the FBI away. I feel like if your baby is missing...
You're going to want all the help.
You would want everybody to help you as possible. He did even crazier stuff.
Well, it's just like, even... I've been watching too much crime shows, but the police never let the families in the investigations unless they need information from them.
Right.
Because they're like, you can't be in this investigation because we can't have you changing anything.
Right. So you can, like, answer your questions about the baby, where you were that night, what happened, this is the situation. But you're not getting to call the shots of who can come into the house, who can do what, which agents are allowed to help, how you process stuff.
Because, one, you can be a suspect, but also you're too emotionally involved. That's why they never keep family members.
Right. Or you would imagine you would be.
Yeah.
When your baby's missing.
Yeah.
And you got a ransom note, and you instantly, right off the bat, were like, they stole our baby! Well,
Who's they?
Yeah. You already know you got enemies? So who took your baby?
I think I would want the FBI helping me out with that.
I think I would want anybody that was going to offer, I would be like, heck yes, help me find this baby. But, so the crime scene was just chaotic. I think they found a footprint, but there was also it was trampled over, all over the place.
Trampled before it even, like, began.
Yeah, in and out of the house, it was just destroyed. The next biggest part of the whole case is the ransom notes. So we'll dive into those and kind of piece them together, because there was 13 ransom notes and, like, communications back and forth between the alleged kidnapper and then the Lindbergh party of people who were trying to track down this baby. So the first one was the one that was found on the windowsill, which was March 1st. And it's really, you can look them up, like I said. It's written in really terrible, broken English. Words are spelled wrong. They even do the money sign wrong on the ransom amount, so they keep putting the $sign after the numbers. And so it said, "Dear sir, have 50,000 ready," spelled REDY. 25,000 in 20s, 5,000 in $10 bills, and then 10,000 in $5 bills. So they were specific about how they wanted the money broke down too. And it says, "After 2 to 4 days, we will inform you where to deliver the money," spelled capital MONY, the money.
The money.
"And we warn you for making any ding, ANYDING, any ding public, or for the police, the child is in good care. And it says, indication for all letters or signature in 3 holes. So when you look at the letters, it almost looks like, I always think it looks like a coffee cup stain. But it's really not. It's like their signature that they put on there. And it's these holes and these, like, crescent moon type shapes.
It's a coffee mug.
That's what it looks to me. Every time I see it looks like they just, like, set it down and it's got, like, a ring on it. But no, that was their signature of how they would let them know that each one is legit. So that is definitely one to look at, because the grammar is bad and the way it's written is bad. And it's handwritten. So, it's blue interlocking circles, like a Venn diagram, and then a red dot in the middle, and 3 punctures across the center is actually what it is. But when you look at it, everything's black and white. So, I forgot about the colors on there. The next ransom note came March 6th, and it raised the ransom to $70,000. And in it, they talk about how they turned it into a world affair, And they were like, is it really necessary to make a world affair of this? Which they actually say that exact same thing in a couple other ones too. So where he brought attention to it. And so they were talking about how they keep him in good care and they're feeding him according to his diet. So they're actually having to raise the ransom to take care of him because they've had to bring another person in. It says ransom was made another $50,000, but now we have to take another person to it and probably have to keep the baby longer than expected. So they raised the ransom note or the ransom amount. And then March 8th, a third note comes, and this one was, they're trying to get a go-between between the kidnappers and Lindbergh's party of people. So in this one, it talks about that Lindbergh can't be his own go-between, and the request needs to be put in the paper. So they start doing these notes back and forth in the paper. Because they say, this is in the ransom note, we believe the police captured 2 letters and they didn't forward them, is what they believe. So that's why they wanted a go-between. So, but they said they won't accept any go-between that Lindbergh sets up. Because they think the police weren't giving them their letters. Which I tried to find some more stuff that was talked about that, because I'm curious about the letters that they said they sent that the police didn't give to Lindbergh.
Yeah.
Which is weird to me. And they also, in some of these, they comment about how Lindbergh didn't respond fast enough. And they're like, why didn't you respond?
With the way the letters were wrote, too, that almost makes me think that it's a smart person trying to sound like someone who doesn't speak English.
I thought that, too. And especially when you look at them, because it's just, like, kind of random stuff that's messed up.
Yeah.
Just enough to make it look crazy and like pieced together instead of like really messing up words consistently. It's like just random, like they were through and like, oh, this will look weird, this will make it look
like
different.
It's somebody else.
Yeah.
Are there any where it like the word is spelled correctly once and then like misspelled one time?
I'm not sure. That would be something to look at through them. I read through them, but I didn't compare them to each other. Now, they do some handwriting analysis that we'll talk about a little bit later. I feel like I keep putting everything off a little bit later. A little bit later.
It all
just have
comes
more
to a
leading
good
up.
end.
Yeah. Because they compare the first note to some of these other ones and see some stuff. But I don't know as far as the word in the letters, things changing. Some of them are hard to read. Some of them you're like, what are they even going for? Just because the words are so random.
Yeah.
So they're trying to set up the go-between. And I will go back to that. That's what you kept looking at on my notes, the gooblers. Yeah. Because there's several weird aspects of these go-betweens. For one, the actual go-between in the case that everybody knows of, which I'll talk about him first, and then the ones that Lindbergh wanted to be the go-betweens are all a little strange to me. So, it was March 8th was that third ransom note, and they said Lindbergh couldn't be his own go-between, and he couldn't pick his go-between. So then, some random man named Dr. John Condon put in a letter in the newspaper and said he would add $1,000 to the ransom and act as a go-between. Just some random guy. He was just some random man who was like, I'll put money towards it and I'll be the go-between. And he was a 72-year-old retired school principal. And he was always like writing letters and I guess like editorials sort of and sending them to the Bronx Home newspaper. And they say he just felt really troubled by the Lindbergh case. And so he wrote that letter in there to try and help in some way. And he actually, his was published on March 8th in 1932. And then on the 9th, the kidnappers responded and said that he could be the go-between.
So they were
for
like,
Lindbergh. So
okay.
So they said that would work. And he went by the name Jaffe. Jafsie, Jafsie. And it was actually his initials, JFC. But that's how he signed all his stuff in the paper. Because from here on out, they start communicating between newspaper ads. Okay. And so that's how he would sign his on there. And he was actually a key witness in the trial and positively identified the man who essentially took the fall for it. Which was I've not mentioned his name yet because I was going to kind of focus on him, but it was Bruno Hoffman, and he positively identified him. But I have my feelings about that too, you know.
We'll get to it.
We'll get to those. Since we already hit on the go-between, this was kind of, I didn't know it right off the bat. I knew Lindbergh did a lot of weird stuff with this case, but Lindbergh actually wanted two people to be go-betweens, and it was Irving Bitts and Salvi Spatel, and they were mobsters. That's who he wanted to be his go-between. He wanted, they were actually bootleggers, and the big known mobster, Morris Rosner, he was known as Mickey Rosner, was actually the one who offered them up to him and to be his go-between, which the kidnappers didn't go for. But there was so much. He didn't want the FBI, Lindbergh didn't want the FBI's help, but he was reaching out to
mobsters.
Yeah, the underground for help. And so there's actually a quote from Mickey Rosner, and it said, "I was promised fame and fortune if I succeeded. I said that if the underworld had this baby, it would be back in his crib in 48 hours. But there was no baby to get back. They said they did not have it, and they said not to give the money up." So he said that in 1932. So he did his digging and nobody in the underground had the baby. Al Capone also reached out and offered his assistance to Lindbergh. And Lindbergh actually said no, he didn't want his help because he was focusing more on the New York mobsters. And Al Capone was more of a Chicago mobster.
It was probably because Al Capone could have found the baby and found all the dirty stuff that...
He might have. Anytime Al Capone's mentioned, I'm like, ooh, that's cool. Al Capone was also in jail at this time. This is when they'd already got him. So there's some speculation on whether or not he was really just trying to get out. I did think it was weird. I also thought it was weird that he wanted to focus on New York mobsters when they were in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I don't know, unless he thought maybe New York mobsters knew a little bit more about New Jersey than a Chicago mobster, but I'm like, a mobster's a mobster.
Yeah,
I think close enough that he could own them.
Right, for wanting to, yeah. What you're wanting to do, you want to check the underground. Chicago's the next big chunk. So, and it was actually March 2nd, 1932, so this was really close, when he was in Cook County Jail in Chicago, and he offered $10,000 towards it to help. And his direct quote from it was, "I know how Mrs. Capone and I would feel if our son were kidnapped, and I sympathize with the Lindberghs." So, smooth talker. And he kept reaching out and offered to put this made me laugh. He offered to put up bail for himself and put his younger brother in jail in his place.
He was like, you know what? I will bail myself out and put my brother in there.
Yeah, here, I'll give you the money, and then we'll put my brother in.
And then once we figure this out, I'll go back in.
And then I'll go help find the Lindbergh baby. And then I'll come right back.
Yeah, like
I'll come right back.
A little switcheroo.
And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think you would come back, sir.
I don't know if that's how that would happen. But...
I think you are a sneaky snake. So, I just thought it was funny. Because, they had such a hard time catching Al Capone anyway. Mm-hmm. Through the
wasn't even thing. His jail cell... decked out with all sorts of nice stuff. So he was still in control while he was in jail.
Yeah, it looks like a little motel room or something. He's got a nice bed, a rug, a recliner, and like one of those old fashioned radios.
So he probably would have came back. He'd be like,
He might.
Just
Yeah,
stick
he'd
here
be like,
for a
"That'll be
second,
fine."
and then I'll be back.
He could have. I think he probably would have ran though.
Yeah, I think he would have.
Well, they still only ever got him on tax evasion. Didn't pay those taxes is what they finally got him on. But that was him offering to help, and he kept offering it and the money and all that stuff. It was actually even discussed by the Senate. The Senate debated letting him out to help. But they kind of weighed the options, and they didn't think he had necessarily anything to offer up that more than what was already going on. But I thought that was pretty cool that the Senate was like, should we let him out? Should we let Al Capone
Maybe he will
out?
come back.
Maybe. They were like, he did say he would put his brother in. He would let his brother go in there. But that almost even like sent me down a different spiral of Al Capone. And then I was like looking at Al Capone and his family and his son, who supposedly isn't even his biologically. And I was like, that's a different episode.
Yeah.
I might do an Al Capone special. We'll see.
Down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, but I did think it was pretty cool the names that are attached to this case.
Yeah.
Al Capone, and then those Irving Bitts and Salvi Spatel, which isn't they were active mobsters too. And Irving Bitts was kidnapped and murdered in 1981, and it actually caught my attention because they found him and he had shark bites on him. They called it like a shark bite murder because he washed up. So then I was like, I know how this goes. But I don't think the shark bites were really the cause of death. I think he just got dumped in the ocean and washed up. But I still thought it was interesting.
I remember what it was called. It's called something when you leave them to the sharks.
So that's what happened to him. And I can't remember. I think Salvi Spatal had something else going on too. But it was just, mobsters. So, now back to our Ransom Note timeline here. So, the go-between is Jaffe, Dr. Condon. And so they wrote him back, and they were like, if you're willing to act as a go-between, that's fine. Just follow these instructions. And they're like, money is ready, and all this stuff. They're like ready to get their money and move on. And so that was March 9th is when they do that. That's the fourth one, and they're like on March 9th. March 12th, Dr. Condon actually gets a letter from a stranger. A stranger gave a letter to a taxi driver that was given to him, and it led him to another note that was like hidden under a rock that said the instructions on meeting Cemetery John in Woodlawn Cemetery.
So a nice little scavenger hunt for the instructions.
Yep, and these notes, it gets a little interesting because I start to notice less grammar and spelling issues. It's like now they're like down to business. So it seems to be a little more serious, but that could just be my opinion. I could just be reading into that. But they start to give him more instructions, like take a car, drive to the last subway station from Jerome Avenue, 100 feet from this last station on the left, and there's an empty Frankfurter stand with a big open porch around it. And there's another notice there that'll tell you stuff. And then after 3/4 of an hour, be in this place, bring the money with you. And then he finds another note, and it tells him to cross the street, and there's a fence in the cemetery, which is where they're meeting. And they say, so Jaffe sends another one. He's like, money is ready, no cops, no Secret Service, no press. I come alone like the last time. So he's also like sending stuff back and forth. And they actually, so March 12th is when, a lot of that's going on. And they key the term Cemetery John for the guy they're meeting. And they ask for proof. They want proof that the child's okay because at this point it's been 12 days since the baby's been missing. And they don't have anything. So March 16th, there's another note, and a baby sleeper, and he meets with them, and that's what he gets, is like the pajamas. And this, I couldn't find it for sure, but I remember this from before. It's the nurse who actually identifies the pajamas as what the child was wearing. And gives the yes, like that's right. That's what I put him in. I'd put him in that night. And so then they accept that, and then they keep moving forward. And the 8th note mentions that it had been a year-long planned kidnap. So it talks about already having tried to do this. So it says, we'll tell you again, this kidnapping case was prepared for a year already, so police won't have any luck to find us or this child. And so it says, you can push everything further out. Did you send a little package to Mr. Lindbergh? We send a little package. See, and it's back and forth with the wording here. It contains a sleeping suit for the baby as well. And so they're like talking about how Lindbergh's only wasting his time searching. He was starting to do like flights and searching. Like they're still actively searching for the baby. They're not just, doing nothing. And Jesse's like, yes, we got it. All this stuff. And then there's nothing, and he's like, money's ready. We just need a code to let us know you're ready. So then they get another one on March 30th, the 9th note, and they're threatening to increase the money even more. Because I guess they felt like they were dragging their feet. I don't really know. They weren't getting their money fast enough.
But I mean, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, so now it's up to, it was up to $100,000. So they even say, we'll ask for $30,000 more. So from 70 to 100,000. And they say, how can Mr. Lindbergh follow so many false clues? He knows we are the right party. And I don't know what they were going for, but their signature is still the same in the ransom note. But if Mr. Lindbergh likes to fool around for another month, we can help it. Is like what they say. So they're like, we want our money. What's he doing? So they're starting to get antsy, and you can just tell from the notes. And they keep saying, every time they keep saying the child's well. And then Jassy was like, I accept, the money is ready. I'm like, you keep saying the money's ready, but it clearly is not.
Yeah, because they're getting a little ticked off.
Yeah, because they're not doing it. So April 1st, the 10th note comes. So now it's been a full month because the baby went missing March 1st. And so April 1st, the 10th note says have the money ready. And they're saying they're watching everything closely. And they want you to deliver the money. And then in 8 hours, they'll get the address to find the boy, is what they say. And so April 2nd, a stranger again gives the note to a taxi driver who delivers it. Oh, this is the one. The first one didn't lead it to a rock. It just led it to another location. This last note was the one that was under a rock. And again said, meet Cemetery John in the cemetery. And negotiated more with the ransom. And after they get the money, then there's a final note that says the child could be found on a boat called Nellie near Martha's Vineyard. They find the boat, and the baby's not on it. So then they're kind of like panicking because there's no more communication. They already gave the money, and so now it's just continuing to hunt and search for the baby. So on May 12th of 1932, so that's went missing on March 1st, and then May 12th, they found the body of the baby 4.5 miles from home. The head was crushed, there was a hole drilled, and it was burned and partially buried. And the cause of death was that it was a blow to the head, and the child had been dead for about 2 months. So the child had been dead the whole time, even when they were saying it was well. Which is, it's really disturbing. You can actually even see pictures of the remains online. But I just think it's all that time. It was 4.5 miles from their house. All that searching, and you didn't start
around
you didn't start from your house and span out.
It just makes it even more shady.
Yeah.
Especially denying the help of FBI, because I don't know about at that point, but I know now, currently, that's usually where they start, is around.
Yeah.
That's how it usually is. You start around the area and then branch out to faraway places.
Right.
I nearly said something because the way showing the baby as well was showing the pajamas. I was like, that ain't showing you diddly.
Yes. Which, and I will go ahead and throw that in. This might be a little all over the place, but my thing with the pajamas that goes into my conspiracy is because you can see the baby, and when you read stuff about the baby's body being found, it was in clothes. So how did they positively identify this piece of fabric or these clothes as what the baby was in when the baby was clearly in it in the grave? So I'm like, how was that used to identify the baby? I don't know. That's a weird thing too, and I've done digging to see, but how do they identify? Oh yeah, that's what I put on the baby that night. But then the baby was found in it.
So it was found in the same thing that got sent.
It was still in its. I mean, it was kind of decayed and burned, but it was still had the cloth on it.
That's interesting.
Right. That's a weird one to me. That's a weird for me.
Yeah.
It's weird for me. So we've talked about some of Lindbergh's shadiness and the ransom notes. So now we'll get into a couple weird things, and then we'll talk about Richard Bruno Hoffman, who took the fall. And then I'll tell you, Briar's itching to hear my conspiracy.
I really am.
Which we'll do that right there at the end of what I think happened. So one of the weird things that I hadn't really heard of until I was gathering all my stuff for this was about one of the Lindbergh servants named Violet Sharp. And she actually works with Mrs. Lindbergh's mother in her home, and she was an English immigrant. She was questioned a lot. There's pictures of her. I actually sent the picture to Briar because it was really late one night when I was doing my research, and her picture made me feel so unsettled that I had to hide it while I was reading that page. I couldn't look at her image because it was heaving me out.
What did it look like?
It's not even it was necessarily scary. It was just a vibe she gave off.
Yes.
And it was just very unsettling.
Was it she was freaked out, or was she?
No, it's it was just a picture of her. It's older and it's black and white, and her eyes are very, very dark. And it just we're gonna pull it up right now.
Okay. Because I was I need to see this.
So.
Yeah, that's a little... What is up with her eyes?
Right, it's just unsettling. And not to be insulting or insensitive, but it's just her eyes are so dark and it's so scary.
Well,
and her grin is
dark, but you can see the whites of her eyes still.
It almost reminds me of a mask. Especially the newer masks that went around I feel like it was 2019, but it might have been 2020, and it was the silicone ones.
Oh, that's skin
that
tight.
were supposed to be skin tight.
Yes. Yeah. So it just, and maybe the thin eyebrows. It could just be.
It could have just been the way the picture was taken, but that's.
Yeah, because even there, so that one's a little different, but it's not as creepy. I don't think it's the same picture. It's just not as zoomed in, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know. It was still unsettling. And at 1 a.m, when you're doing creepy research, it was definitely
you just have eyes staring at you.
Yes, and it was really big because you know how my monitor is, and she's right there in my face, and I'm
we're getting rid of you.
I think she's still looking at my soul. So I'm going to have to keep on scrolling. And I would put my hand up, and I was all right, I'm done on this page with her picture. But check our website if you would like to see the picture.
Let us know what you all think.
So she was, and I had never heard of her before. Even in my previous Lindbergh research, I hadn't really dived into this side because I was so intent on Lindbergh. I was there is no other story. Lindbergh is a liar. Lindbergh did it. But she was the only one of the staff who couldn't really get a good story for herself. She couldn't set up a strong alibi for the night. And it was just, she was like really back and forth. She kept doing different statements. One time she said she rode in a car with 2 men and a woman, but she didn't know them, but that was supposed to be her alibi. So she said she was with people, but didn't know the people. And she got a phone call the night that baby Lindy went missing, but refused to say who called her. Because she was actually there, around with them. And so they questioned her pretty hard. And they just said it was just kind of like, it was back and forth. And they couldn't get anything straight. And she would switch. And there's a picture of her with a man that I saw on one thing. And she just kept saying, oh no, I don't know who that is. I don't know. She just wouldn't really come clean about anything and just seemed so confusing, and it was making her look really guilty. They actually set up to come question her again. They'd already been questioning her. They were like, we're going to question her again. And they hear her. She ran screaming and then died shortly after. And she actually poisoned herself on June 11th, 1932, because she didn't want to be questioned by the police anymore.
That's a little shady.
That is what I thought too. Because it just seems, I think now there are things now that talk about her innocence, but I just really feel like that's wild to me.
How do you not know like who you were with? You have pictures. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know who called me.
Yeah.
Like, how are you gonna be like, I don't know about every single thing?
Right. And then, so that just kept making her, like, guilty. So if you're really innocent, and, so I'm sure there was a lot of police harassment. I'm sure it wasn't simple questioning. Especially since she was an English immigrant. I think they were a little extra rough on her. So the next little chunk that I think is an interesting element you have to remember is, apparently Lindbergh didn't like his son.
No.
Didn't like his baby?
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of stories and things about that. Liz Pearlman actually wrote a book, and her view was that Lindbergh was responsible. And I was like, I second that.
I agree.
But he would refer to his son as it.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. And he didn't feel like his son lived up to his own perfection. Because supposedly, when his wife was pregnant, they went on a cross-country flight in April of 1930. And the toxic fumes that she breathed while pregnant affected the baby.
Oh, okay.
And so the baby also supposedly had rickets, which is, it affects the bones. And so he was always taking large amounts of vitamin D, and he had a special sun lamp that he had to lay under.
Which, thinking back of where, like, he's been known to call his son it. Mm-hmm. But then he goes into the room and first thing he says is, they stole our baby!
Yeah.
So, like, now it's your baby, but, like, yesterday it was it? Okay.
Right. And that was because he had hammer toes, and his cranium was too large, and his skull bones not fused properly, which was part of the rickets, because it affects your bones and things. So, I'm like, that's pretty messed up.
Yeah. When it was his fault, because he flew.
Right, because he had her fly while pregnant.
Yeah.
Because, back in the 30s, like, airplanes weren't what they used to be today. It wasn't like flying. It was like you're in a tin tube with wings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wasn't there's a rule now, but is it just for it could damage the pregnancy, or is it they don't want a woman giving birth on the plane? Because I know there's rules like you have to be so many months pregnant to be able to fly.
Yeah, it's probably a little bit of both in certain situations, because I imagine the pressure and stuff like that. But a lot of times, too, they don't want you giving birth on a plane.
Okay.
But I think it is. I think it can be, like, detrimental. But in that case, it was more just breathing in those fumes because they weren't in any sort of airtight plane. So that was, that's Liz Perlman talks about that in her book. So the next little chunk, which actually I'll save that to talk about Governor Harold Hoffman, because his pertains more to Richard Bruno Hoffman, who is really who they were blaming. He kind of took the fall. And he was an illegal German immigrant, so it's right in that time. He was a carpenter, and he got the death sentence on April 3rd, 1936. And they actually offered to reduce his sentence to life in prison if he would confess. And he still refused to say that he did it. And they also offered him $90,000 to confess.
What?
And he refused to do it.
So they're just wanting a confession out of this dude. So that's already shady. Why are you wanting this dude to confess so much? You're offering him money and also off the death penalty.
That was when he was in jail. And they're trying to bribe him into saying he did it. Because he stuck to his story the whole time. And they wanted,
Wanted more.
Yeah.
More drama.
But they kept on. He's the one who... Joffsey was actually identified him as being Cemetery John, which after doing some of the research, that he doesn't line up to the description of the man that they saw. But there is another man, and I can't remember his name, and I thought I had it down, but he actually looked more. They have a depiction of what Cemetery John was supposed to look like. And it doesn't look like Bruno Hoffman. It looks more like this other man. But Joffsey actually identified Bruno as being the one he saw in the cemetery. What they got him, they actually arrested him in September of 1934 because he was using a gold certificate worth $10 that was part of the ransom. So, the ransom money that had been received. And when they searched his home, they found $14,600 of the ransom. Now, his story this is a big known story. They call it the fish story because his business partner was a man named Isidore Fish. And he gave him a box that was all taped up and just told him that it was some important documents and told him to hang on to it while he went on a trip. And in that box ended up being the ransom money. So they said that they found it. He had owed Hoffman $7,000. And then he died on March 29th of 1934. And so he was obviously never coming back to the U.S. And so the Hoffman actually had a roof leak. And so the roof was leaking and there was damage, and he found the box. And that's when they discovered that the box was filled with money. So he kind of was like, well, he owed me $7,000 and he's dead now. So he kept the money. And that's when he he took the gold certificate and was spending it. And he has a super tight alibi, but they still don't care. He had that money. They don't care about this story. He's a German immigrant, and they're like,
it's you.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Here we go. And so he has an airtight alibi for the night of the Cemetery John meetings, even though Joffsey says that he is the one that was there. Because every Saturday he has a friend and he would come over and they would have a music night together. And so they would be hanging out. So his wife and his friend and him were all home that night, but they were like,
nope.
No.
You have that money. You have that certificate.
Yep, you did it. And so we've talked a little bit earlier about the handwriting. So they actually had 7 different handwriting experts look at the letters. And they testified that he wrote the ransom notes. But they also said that he wrote all 14. But at the same time, they all said the first ransom note was different. So the first ransom note at the house does not match the handwriting of any of the other ones. So that was it. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And you can look at his handwriting in connection with the other ones, and it does look very similar, but I just don't know. There's a part of me that feels like maybe he just got wrapped up in the cover-up, because Lindbergh was not doing this very organized. He sent out a thing into the, the underground world with the mobsters about the baby. He was, very open. They were responding through the newspaper.
Yeah.
So I'm like, was he fishing to get someone to play along? And someone to try and come and get Ransom? And so maybe, Bruno and some of these other people got together and they were like, let's get some money. They didn't really do it, but they were trying to get money.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's up to $100,000.
Yeah, they got it up to $100,000 at the end because they kept taking so long. So, that's something I've wondered too. If maybe they were just messing. Not messing, I mean, that's not something to joke about.
Well, taking credit for something.
Right, because they saw it as an opportunity to get money. Because he was just, acting crazy and, because he did it, but...
That's not here nor there.
Yeah. There was another book by Gregory Algren and Stephen Monnier in 1993 called The Lindbergh Kidnapping Hoax. And so they talk about a lot of stuff. How the house wasn't done and he'd been staying there on the weekends and the baby was sick. And because it was such a spur of the moment, nobody knew they were there. So they and I haven't read this book, but I think they take more of an inside job. Also, kind of Lindbergh was a little bit in on it. It was all set up. It wasn't really a real kidnapping because it doesn't make sense. Nobody knew they were there.
Yeah.
The kidnapping just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, because nobody knew they were staying
across
at the
the board.
house.
Yeah.
Besides the
family.
the nurse, the family.
Right. Now, Bruno Hoffman, I keep saying, it's Richard Bruno Hoffman. It's really sad because his wife fought for him until the day she died, even after he was executed, and trying to get his, all his stuff overturned and that he was innocent. Because Governor Harold Hoffman, he actually visited Bruno in prison, and he also didn't believe that he was guilty. Because same thing, all these different things, and he would not admit to guilt. He said he didn't do it. And he actually gave him a 30-day reprieve, and so hoping that would give them time to kind of petition for clemency and get him, a new case started up. And his wife, like I said, she fought to try and clear his name until she died in October of 1991. So she was still fighting for it. And it's kind of sad. She just was pleading for him to open the case again and relook at everything. So, which is kind of sad. She spent her whole life trying to clear his name. That's what she did, till the very end. And one of his last words, he has a quote, and it says, "They think when I die, the case will die. They think it will be like a book I close, but the book, it will never close." That's one of his things. And there's also a letter that he wrote to Governor Harold Hoffman. And this was in March 31st of 1936. And I'll just go ahead and read it. It's not very long. He said, "My writing is not for fear of losing my life. This is in the hands of God. It is His will. I will go gladly if it means the end of my tremendous suffering. Only in thinking of my wife and my little boy that is breaking my heart. I know until this terrible crime is solved, they will have to suffer under the weight of my unfair conviction. I beg you, Attorney General, believe at least a dying man. Please investigate, because this case is not solved. It only adds another death to the Lindbergh case. I thank your excellence from the bottom of my heart, and may God bless you. Respectfully, Bruno Richard Hoffman." And then his last statement on April 3rd, 1936. He said, "I'm glad that my life in a world which has not understood me has ended. Soon I will be at home with my Lord, so I'm dying an innocent man. Should, however, my death serve for the purpose of abolishing capital punishment, such a punishment being arrived at only by circumstantial evidence, I feel that my death has not been in vain. I am at peace with God. I repeat, I protest my innocence of the crime for which I was convicted. However, I will die with no malice or hatred in my heart. The love of Christ has filled my soul, and I am happy in him. So he's still...
Even he's like, I didn't do it. So
is his son still alive?
I am not sure if his son is still alive or not. I actually didn't really look. I looked at his wife and a little bit of what she did there at the end, but I hadn't really looked at his son. So that's, and you can, I mean, there's like a whole, because he is who they investigated. So there is a whole chunk of
all his stuff.
Yes. And there's a book, and I didn't get to read it in time for this podcast, so maybe I'll come back later, or maybe I'll post about it on social media. We'll see. But it's called Cemetery John, the Undiscovered Mastermind of the Lindbergh Kidnapping by Robert Zorn. And his father was named Eugene Zorn Jr., and he believed had been witness to the conspiracy of the kidnapping. And he said he heard two German men speaking, and he heard them say Lindbergh. And I think he said something about, like, Bruno, so he thinks he heard them, planning the conspiracy. So that'd be an interesting thing. But I very much think that Bruno was innocent.
Yeah. I think just with the way he, even, like, going out, knowing that there was no turning back, he didn't even just, at the end, be like, yeah, I fought as long as I could, but here's the truth. No. At the very end,
because they offered him just life in prison. He didn't have to go on death row, and they offered him money. Mm-hmm. But in my opinion, you saying no to both those makes it seem like you're innocent, because it's like, no, I'm not getting pinned for something I didn't do.
Right. So either he was really strong in his conviction of he didn't do it, or I almost wonder, what if Lindbergh threatened his family? So what if he was like, that wouldn't make sense, because then he could say he was guilty. I don't know. I just don't see why you wouldn't. If you were guilty and you're right there at the end, why not just go ahead and take any of those deals? He still cared about his family.
Yeah.
So he could have took that money and gave it to them.
Yeah. But even him, I think him being like, even his last words being that, like, the book might be closed, but the story, like, but it's really not.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Whether it's like the story may be over, but this book isn't closed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that was definitely...
Right. And then where he talks about, he's like, all this does is add another death to the Lindbergh case.
Yeah.
That's oh, you can say?
Oh, I was just going to say, like, I definitely think that's his innocence being proven, really, not taking any of those deals.
Yeah. And
just even saying, reopen it. Like, even if I'm going to be on death row, reopen it because it's not solved.
Right.
Yeah.
Even there at the end, he's like, it's wrong.
Yeah.
He's like, he's kind of like, it is what it is.
Well, because
you're not going to listen to me, but I wish you would just look, because it's not right. It's not done.
Yeah, and to me, a guilty person would have took those deals. That's like Ted Bundy said he was innocent till the day he died, but he took all these deals.
Yeah.
Like how he started, like, yes, I did do this case, but I didn't do this one. And then years later, he's like, yes, I did do this case. And that's what kept him off of death row for so long.
Yeah.
But I'm like, he wasn't doing that. He said no.
Yeah, Bruno's like, I'm not taking a deal because I didn't do it. Mm-hmm. So, now, there's so much into that part. I just really I like to focus on some of the other stuff, the crazier stuff, because you can find all kinds of stuff on him if you want to, and there's actually a lot out there on this case, too. There's a whole website, and we'll have the link, because I used a lot of their sources, but not even all of them, but it's like the LindberghCase.com or something like that. Check the website. Now, my conspiracy.
Yeah, we're getting into the good ones.
This is what I'm excited for.
My belief and what I think happened was, I think he was crazy. And I think he was playing a joke again. And so he planned it all around. He wanted to keep everybody there and to come home early, and that he snuck into the bedroom, kidnapped, quote unquote, the baby, And as he was coming down, the rung broke. That's what you were getting at earlier. Yeah. And he dropped the baby. Because if he was falling, he wasn't going to fall and hurt himself. He's going to let go of that baby and catch himself. And I think that's what happened. Was that he essentially killed the baby. Because he was sneaking him out the window and dropped him. Which was one of the causes of death, was the crushed baby skull. And where he had rickets and some bone issues anyway, his head wasn't formed. So he wouldn't have survived that. And then it was just a cover-up from there.
Yeah.
Now, some of these other pieces, I don't know. I've got new theories. Maybe some people knew some stuff. You know, maybe his servant, Violet Sharp, you know, maybe she knew something. Maybe that's why she was scared to say anything. And her stories weren't lining up because she knew what the family was doing.
Yeah, she didn't want to take the fall.
Yeah.
Yep. But I think he didn't like his son. And I think he thought he was being funny. And that's what I think happened.
I mean, he hid the baby in the closet.
Right before. And I think he thought he would do it again. And it went wrong. Or who knows? Maybe his plan the whole time was to get rid of the baby completely because he didn't like him.
Yeah.
And he was embarrassed by his son. And because that all plays out. You know, you weren't allowed in the baby's room. He missed his speaking engagement to get there. So maybe I'm thinking too innocent of he was just trying to play a prank. And maybe his goal was to get that baby out and go toss it in the field.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like all of those are plausible. Like all of, whether it was just a joke or it was really in ill blood of he just wanted rid of it.
Mm-hmm. And that's why he let the crime scene get trampled. He wouldn't let the FBI help.
The one letter was different than all the rest.
The very first ransom letter was different. Oh, and we can go back to his wife's note that she got. The $50,000 in a cemetery. But then all of this was done in a cemetery. It started out as $50,000 and just kept going up.
Yeah.
And everything was done and passed over in a cemetery. So I think that's weird.
Almost makes sense with what you were saying earlier of like all of them just being like, let's try to get some money. Mm-hmm. So it really was just Charles.
Yeah.
And then he made it out to be where like, there's got to be the in-betweens.
Yeah. And then he just ran with it. He's like, okay.
People started signing up for it. So he was like, okay, cool.
And that's why, the baby had been gone the whole time. There was never a baby on the Nelly. And I think some people were like, oh, this is an opportunity to cash in for some money. And that's what happened. And then Lindbergh was like, oh, even better for my part.
I can pin it on somebody.
Yeah.
We just gotta find somebody who took that money. You may not know this, but where is his wife in all this that's going on?
She just the mourning wife of her son's missing. And letting Charles Lindbergh do whatever he wants. He has some, colorful history, too. Like I said, there's, the Nazi sympathizer and stuff. And then he had all those baby mamas in Germany. So he wasn't this nice man. He was, golden child of America because he flew the plane. But he was not a good man.
I have a question, because maybe you don't know, but this would be interesting to me because I forgot about the Nazi sympathizer thing. Was Bruno Jewish? Do we know?
I don't know if he was Jewish. I
know he's German, so that kind of is weird that it connects that way. But
I'm not sure if he was or not, honestly. But I just knew he was a German immigrant. So,
because I was like, that'd be even more what if it connected in that way?
Yeah,
that would be.
Mm-hmm. But it's a shady case.
Very shady.
And it was huge. It was huge in, United States history. Because it changed
the way everything
the
was
laws
run.
for kidnapping. And, it's just wild. It never would have happened that way today.
Oh, no.
No. We say that with a lot of cases. But there's no way that they would have let him just run a case however he wanted. Send an open offer out there to criminals to be like, hey, any information on my kid? It just wouldn't go that way today.
No, now you can get in serious trouble if you even pretend to be a part of a case that's going on.
Yeah.
Because it used to be like people would pretend to be a killer or a kidnapper or something, and they find out they wouldn't be. Mm-hmm. But now there's serious consequences. Like you could go to jail or prison for lying.
Yeah. So I think now, second time looking through it, I think it was more sinister. I think he wanted to get rid of his son.
Yeah, especially with the not even like calling his son, calling him it.
Yeah, and I think maybe his son was getting older. He was about to turn 2.
And he probably still had all these problems.
Yeah, and he still had all the problems. And I think he was just like, I did it before, and they panicked. Now I'll just really take him out here, and it'll be fine. And I actually forgot to mention earlier, with Governor Harold Hoffman, when he passed away in 1985, they found all kinds of case documents in his garage. They found 23 pages of case documents just from, like, local side, sort of. And then 30,000 pages from the FBI that were not used in Bruno's trial at all on the case. So he still believed he was so innocent and was, like, actively working as well, trying to prove his innocence and get the case reopened because there's so much that was just ignored. They just wanted it closed so it didn't go unanswered, and he believed that Bruno was a scapegoat. And as do I.
As do I.
As do I.
That's a triple I do. Bruno was innocent. Lindbergh killed his baby. Peace out. Thanks for hanging out with us. Until next time.
Remember, you can find us on
Our own website,
Facebook,
Instagram,
YouTube,
Twitter,
and even Pinterest.
Links are in the description.
As always,
stay weary,
stay leery,
and stay eerie.